steering wheel. Somebody tell him to give it to me.
There's something loose between my legs.
I don't know. Let go!
I'm heavier than a freaking boat.
Nothing he's going to say can make that any better.
Yeah, nobody. No more radio for the rest of the race.
I'm going home. You.
Hello and welcome to DRSFC, an F1 podcast by soccer nerds. I am a soccer nerd. I'm André Carlisle here with two other soccer nerds. Deepti, how are you?
I'm good, André. I'm just excited to talk about this race. And this was a really good start to the season, I think.
Yeah. I got some words for some folks. Donald, how are you?
I'm good. So here's what's going to happen for me. I'm going to probably be here for maybe 5 minutes, and then I'm going to dip out. And then 30 minutes into this episode, I'm going to come back for 5 more minutes and then dip out again. And I might do that a couple more times. I'm just trying to get my data here.
I appreciate it. There ain't nothing wrong with the Aston Martin approach. You know, sometimes you need to go take a nap and then come back and try again.
I do need a nap. It's daylight saving is killing me.
That's true.
Oh my God. I straight up forgot about it, y'all.
Me too.
I woke up and I was like, oh man, it's like 9 o'clock or something. I must have slept in or whatever. And then all of a sudden I was like, no, I would have went back to sleep for another hour. I robbed myself because I had no idea that this was happening this weekend. Devastating. All right, but we are going to review the Australian Grand Prix of 2026. It was the very first race of a brand new regulation set. There was so much build up, so much hype, so much intrigue about how this was all going to go. Was it going to be a disaster? Were all the cars just going to pile together, given the starts and the discrepancy in speeds, which I always thought was such a weird thing. We have to change the starts. What if they're going different speeds? That's the point of racing. Anyway, I was so confused about all of that, but they didn't run into each other. Everything was fine. Franco Colapinto, shout out. He saved a really bad crash. That was amazing. If you haven't seen that, check that out. But we're going to talk about it all because it was very, very interesting. And I think every single race, we're probably going to be able to say that, at least for the first handful of this new regulation set, until we get our heads around what's actually going on out there. So for this race, though, Deepti, how about you just let us know the bullet points of what happened.
Yes, I'll try to condense this as much as I can. But I think I'll start from start of the race to finish the race and hit the key points, because right before the race started, during the recon lap, Oscar Piastri, a hometown hero, crashes and he's out. He doesn't even get to the start line, and that's such a bummer, obviously, because it's in his home race. He wanted some redemption from last season. But yeah, doesn't even get to the starting line. And so it's just even worse than anything he could have expected. So that's the beginning. Hulk also didn't start, but they didn't really mention anything about that. We don't really still know why he didn't start. So they were down from 22 drivers to 20. But yeah, key points, obviously. So George won, Kimi came in second, and Charles was third. That was the podium. George and Charles went back and forth, swapping places from P1 and P2 so many times in the first 10, 12 laps. And you know what, that made me so excited, because that's what the racing that we wanted to see. People were talking about how, these cars, Mercedes is going to be so far ahead. You're going to have big gaps between the drivers. It's not going to be racing. We saw a lot of racing this race. And so that made me really happy. Hajar, he had some problems. So I think it was around lap 11, his car broke down, and that brought out a virtual safety car. For some reason, Ferrari didn't pit. Everyone else pit. And you know what? That could have cost them something, because that allowed Mercedes to eventually be on better tires, take over the lead, and hence getting P1 and P2. Lewis came in fourth, so he still has yet to podium in a Ferrari, but obviously he looked good. The Ferraris did look good. It might just have been a strategy thing. He almost caught up to Charles by the end. Max was another big storyline. He started in P20 technically, but like we said, without some of the drivers, and I think there were a couple of people in the pit lane or whatnot. He got all the way up to P6. Lando was P5, and I think he did really good to hold Max off in the last few laps. They were kind of battling. There were two other DNFs besides Hajar. Bottas also was just told to, I guess, stop the car, because we just see him go onto the grass. And then, of course, Fernando Alonso and the Aston Martin. Like Donald just mentioned and alluded to, we're going to talk about them. But I love whoever it was who said that they were intermittent racing. That's the best way to describe it.
That was Spanners from
Yep.
Mistake Picks. He's very good. Check him out. He's very funny.
Yeah, that was just so funny. He was out, and then we suddenly, like 15 minutes later, we see him back on the grid, and we're like, what? He's racing again? The plus 15. I've never seen that on the sideboard before. But one point I want to make is that in the top 10, 8 different constructors got points. So if that has anything to say about like the regulations, how unexpected anything can be, that's that. I think that's really good. And like you said, every team got at least one car to the finish line, sort of. Checo was like a couple laps behind. Stroll, if you can count him finishing, I guess they count it, but not really.
I don't count it.
Yeah, it's funny. Like he was on track when the checkered flag flew, but he probably did like 30 laps, whereas everybody else did 58.
I don't even think he did 30 laps.
How that's finishing the race.
If you see the leaderboard, like when he left and when Alonso left, they were like, okay, out. And then all of a sudden, like 25 laps later, Alonso comes back. And you're like, wait, I think you said, wait, Alonso's racing again. And I look at the tracker and it's like, cool. And it said Alonso plus 2 laps. I'm like, that's a typo. They mean plus 25. Then they wrote plus 12. And I was like, 12 is not that's a random ass number. You just made that number up. Then they said plus 15. And then he left the race. And then 10 laps later, Stroll got back in. And he was like, they're like plus 12. I was like, okay, they used that number from last time, but he's like 40 laps down. I don't think they completed 35 laps total between the two of them.
My favorite part was when Chris Medlin and a bunch of when both cars went in, both Aston Martins went into the garage, went into the pits. The F1 reporters were like, okay, Aston Martin's done for the day. Then about 15 minutes later, I'm in the group chat, all caps, Stroll's back. his name on the timing thing just lit up, and he was back out on the track. And I was just like, I didn't know you could do that. I thought once you were done, you had to there was something official where you had to tell like, I'm out, and that's when you're like officially out and grayed out on that little timing tower they have on the screen. I didn't know you could just come back whenever you want.
Can I even say this? They shouldn't have let him back in. Like, if you're going to be 15 laps, like, if you're going to take 20 laps off and come back, anyone could do this thing. Just put me in the car then, right? Like, in fact, they should have a tag team. If you're just going to be able to swap, like, just come off the grid when you want to, just do like FP1 and FP2 where you're like, hey, reserve driver, rookie crew, get up in there, get you a couple laps in. And then they do it because at a certain point, it was just, like, the car itself wasn't good. This is not the time to be just doing cardio with your car. That is unsafe. And so I thought them being allowed to exit the race and come back in and exit the race, come back in whenever they wanted to was just an unsafe move. I don't think the FIA should have done that.
At one point, Alonso was in P10. He was there for like maybe a couple laps, but he was in the points at some point, and I saw that. I was like, no, there's no way. And then he just keeps dropping and dropping and dropping. Yep. But it was just like, you're right. I mean, I'm surprised they even put 2 cars on the grid to begin with. They only had like the 2 power units that worked, and like they didn't have any spare parts. So I thought, they would just go with the 1 car, and then if something happened, swap it out and then, try to fix it and go again. But I guess not. In the grid walk, Martin Brundle asked, like, he talked to Lawrence Stroll, and Lawrence was like, yeah, we're doing 2 cars. We're going to do as many laps as we can. Like, he obviously is not going to say like, we're just using this to get as much data as we can. We're going to use it as a free practice and not actually race. But that is basically what they did.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest. Donald, I hear you. What is it? I see you. I hear you. I hear your complaints. I do think in a sensible world, you are correct. But I'm in a world that like the jokes trump all. And it was just very, very funny to see Aston Martin be gone and then come back. I was calling him zombie Aston Martin just because suddenly they would just reappear on the track. And I'm like, this busted ass car that is like vibrating. They only have 2 working batteries. And if they blow one up, that's it. That messes them up for a long time. And so, yeah, I thought it was extremely funny to see them gone and then back every now and then. I am
willing to concede the jokes argument of this. Like, I'm willing to concede that and allow that to to be added as an amendment to my complaint. But it's funny. This is obviously something that everyone was prepared for all week. Aston Martin was all but saying that the car was going to cause permanent nerve damage to the drivers if they stayed in it too long. All the betting apps, aim small, miss small, but you couldn't aim at all when it comes to Aston Martin and the bet to classify of them to not classify. They took them completely off on Monday. So literally for a whole week, you could even bet on them being stupid. So that just tells you what we were supposed to expect. And again, I think the FIA should have been like, okay, even in soccer, right? If you get subbed off, that's it. You can't check back in the game unless you're in high school or even maybe college. But like in the pros, once you sub off, that's it. And the FIA can't just have, them trying to pull a Rocky situation. It's one thing if your car is messed up and you're like, hey, if I can fix this car, let's get back in the race and see what we can do. But the car was slow, the car was stupid, and the car hurts drivers. So the FIA should have taken it safe, in my opinion.
I'm going to be honest. I didn't expect us to spend so much time at the beginning of the podcast on Aston Martin, even though because it was very funny, I'm kind of glad we did, but we're going to leave now because I think there are other things that were more interesting to talk about, even though none of us have seen a team do what Aston Martin just did, which does warrant some sort of discussion. But there's other discussions that I think I really want to have. And I think the first one I want to have is about the new regulations and the impact on the racing. There was a lot of talk from the drivers, from pundits, from journalists, from everybody about how this is going to affect the racing, or a lot of people had just dug in their heels that, this is going to be terrible for racing, all of that. And again, it's one track. It's also a track that makes this sort of engine and this regulation set pretty energy starved, so we don't know how it's going to be at a different track where you can recover more energy. Maybe things become more processional or whatever, I don't know. But it did, to me at least, seem like because drivers had more tools at their disposal, one's being chased and one's doing the chasing had more tools. It's not just the car behind has DRS and so vroom vroom, there they go. This was a combination of active aero and boost, which everybody gets. Some get overtake, but you still have to time it right and you have to figure out where your actual advantage is to get around cars. So we weren't seeing overtakes on just primary main straights. You were seeing drivers trying to line each other up, going into different corners. And to me, that's fun. We saw some wheel banging. There was some wheel banging out there. I think Gasly and Ocon were rekindling old beef. They were wheel banging a few times. So like for me, I thought that this race hopefully did a lot to allay some of the fears that people were having, because we still got really good racing. And it could be that everything's so new and nobody really knew how this was going to go. And once all drivers on the grid get a handle on this, maybe this isn't the way races are going to be. But I think at least starting out, it was exciting. And I can kind of see how throughout the season, even with some adjustments, even with some familiarity up and down the grid, things are going to still be interesting.
I thought it was a lot of fun, especially at the top, right? It wasn't where, I mean, and granted, we're used to last year where you had races where the top two drivers were McLarens and they weren't racing each other and they were 30 seconds to have everybody else. So it was very boring, right? How many times we say those words about a race? This one was great from the start. The start was chaotic. Colapinto year 2 did something that Colapinto year 1 would have never done, which is avoid that car in the first 5 milliseconds of the race, and he was causing them last year, and he was a rookie. He was going to do that, but there's also things that are going to be improved as you go along. I remember in the cool down room, they were kind of the 3 podium drivers were watching just all the highlights. And they were talking about, I know we'll talk about a little bit more, but George and Charles kind of going back and forth. And there's a point where George tried to pass Charles and he couldn't. And he said, I forgot to push the overtake button. Like that's why I felt like it was so slow. And Charles was like, yeah, it looked like you had it. And then all of a sudden you just kind of stopped. He's like, yeah, I just forgot to push the button. Those things are going to become more muscle memory as we go along. And so, yeah, I think it's fun. We got some racing out of it, which I think is the best part. It'd been one thing if it was another boring race, and everyone goes, okay, it's boring, and the guys don't like it. but at least this gives everybody a little bit more excitement to continue on with this.
Yeah, I think, like I said, especially in the first like 10, 15 laps, we got so much racings, a bunch of overtakes and just swapping positions between the top two people. And I think you're right. This track maybe is not the best to show us what's going to happen down the line because, like you said, it's a energy deficient lap or energy deficient track. But I think it gives promise for what type of racing we will see, because even George at the end said, like, the boost and the overtake is nice, but because we're using so much battery power, it's really hard to keep a lead once you do overtake someone. So it gives the chance to people behind to catch up again. So you're going to see like that yo-yo effect and going back and forth, which I think is really fun. I think it'll be really fun for us to see, whether or not the drivers like it, because maybe it's just more difficult. They don't. But in terms of like racing and entertainment perspective, it is I think a good thing.
Yeah, I think there's still the question of had Ferrari not had Leclerc, I say specifically, not had the start that he had, which he just flew up the grid into first place right at the start, which, by the way, shout out to the extremely chaotic light person who's in control of those lights, because it got to 5 and then was off. It was quicker than a blink. I was like, oh, okay, this is how we're starting the season.
I'm not waiting another nanosecond.
Right. We are not waiting any more time. As soon as that light goes, oops, it's off. It was tremendous. But I do wonder if George Russell keeps that lead and pulls a second away from Leclerc and he never gets a chance to use overtake. Do we see a race like last year where it's, the whole Oscar Piastri thing, clean air is king, and George is 5 seconds up the road, 10 seconds, 15 seconds up the road. And then he's just managing that because he knows that no matter what anybody else does, he's just going to keep a little bit of life in his tires and his engine and his battery to make sure that nobody gets close enough to be able to really threaten him for the lead. I wonder what would happen if we got into that scenario, and we really won't know until we get to another race and that happens. But it seems like with that Ferrari start and Leclerc getting the lead, then things got fun because, as you said, Deepti, all that passing and repassing, all of a sudden, Lewis Hamilton's now joined the party. Oh, Kimi Antonelli has now joined the party. And so now, you didn't get those big gaps in between cars, especially at the top and the front. You got a nice little pack of cars who, if anybody does anything weird, gets a little squirrely, goes off the track, runs a little wide, now they're dropping potentially off the podium. And that kind of stuff is fun, especially when you're talking about racing at the very front. So I thought it was interesting. But I do want to wait and see how things might go if the race unfolds just a little bit differently from the start.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's race 1, so I'm really excited about what we saw, and I'm glad that the first race of the year, and just more broadly, the first race on Apple TV, first race where another set of audience's eyes new to the sport maybe got there because of the fact that it's on Apple TV and they've heard so much about the complaints. I want to check out the spectacle, see what it's like. They got a good show. And so we weren't talking about us trying to figure out a way to convince people, no, stay in here, stay in the fight. But I promise it gets better. We don't have to. That was, you got some excitement. It came down to the final lap in many different places. So yeah, I think it was I'm sure the FIA is very happy today at how everything went for the most part.
It wasn't just the top tier cars that were battling. Even in the middle of the pack, you had some good battles too. Lindblad was doing really well. He was battling with a couple of cars between 5th and 8th place. And then you have, for the last point, for 10th, you have Ocon and Gasly, and Bortoletto was there at some point. Behrman was there. So you have these packs of cars, like you said, Andre, where throughout the grid and throughout the race, there's a bunch of different little battles going on. So this one at least didn't feel processional. And I thought, like you said, it was a really good introduction to the new regs and the new season, especially for those who were maybe not into F1 at all before, those who are just you said, a lot of the pundits or former fans are just not inspired by the new regs. But I think it just gave a good opportunity to show what it can be like. And I think it was more than we expected in terms of entertainment value.
Yeah, I gotta say, I think the active arrow was really helpful in cars being able to follow each other without like destroying their tires or messing up their aero balance. I think with all the wings just being open, the air was just passing through both cars, and you didn't have those weird pockets of air that creates all that turbulence that the cars hate to be close to one another. And I thought that was really cool because we didn't hear any of that. In that George and Charles battle, we didn't hear like, oh, I can't control or anything. I have to drop back or I have to peel back because I can't control the car or it's tearing up my tires or anything like that. So that was good. That was really, really fun. I thought at some point we might see one of them drop back. I knew it wasn't going to be Charles because that man is just very stubborn on the track. But so is George, I guess. So that was interesting. One thing that I did want to mention and talk about in terms of those battles that were going on, you talked about at the beginning, Deepti, you brought up Ferrari's strategy decision. So yes, there was a virtual safety car. Mercedes took advantage of it. Both cars came in the pit. Both cars came out. And by the time all was said and done, they get first and second on the podium. Ferrari gets third and fourth. Do either of you think that if Ferrari pulls in one car, because we did hear Lewis said you should have brought at least one of us in. Do you think that if they did that, there would have been any difference in the order, given how strong the Mercedes engine is? Do you think maybe we get Charles higher on the podium or Lewis on the podium at all? What do y'all think?
That's so hard to say. I think maybe it could have been a little bit closer where it was, instead of Lewis battling Charles towards the end with like a slight bit of gap between them and the Mercedes, maybe it would have been a little bit closer and maybe there could have been a mix up in the podium. I think George and Kimi, the Mercedes were still faster and a bit, maybe the engine and power unit is just a little bit better. So I don't know that George would have not won. I think that still would have been the case. But I do think if one of the Ferraris had pit, whoever had pit could have gotten like P2, or they probably could have caught up to Kimi or something, especially since Kimi, I think it's not just the pitting strategy. I think the starts also make a big deal. Like Ferrari wins on the starts against any of the teams, and then Mercedes has a better power unit. So like Kimi had a bad start, but he made it up, and that's why he got P2. If Ferrari by the end had like been on the same type of tires and whatever, the same age, etc., like maybe they could have caught up to Kimi. I still think George has like the best car overall and is like in the best position to win. But I don't know. Charles didn't think that it would have made a difference. Obviously, he maybe just has to say that because like you're not going to admit otherwise, perhaps. But I do think it was a wrong decision. And like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they didn't pit under the second safety car either. They just like went with their plan A and waited. So like they had that second chance and didn't do it then until Lewis was like, okay, pit someone, but don't double stack.
Well, he did say that between the two virtual safety cars. He said, if you're going to do this, don't double stack, bring one in, then bring the other in. And then they got the virtual safety car and everyone was like, wow, especially the chat room was like, wow, their stupid strategy actually worked. And they didn't go in for the first lap. And I think it was Bottas, right, retiring the car. And by the time they got around, the pit entry lane had been closed. So they couldn't do it because Bottas's car was being wheeled down pit lane. So they missed a window. And were they going to do that? It's unclear because it had closed by the time they got back around for that to have been a decision. But I think you're right in that it's hard to say that definitively Ferrari would have had higher places. But I personally think that it would have been, a combination of Charles and George going for first and second, and Lewis in third, battling, trying to hold off Kimi. So I think that's probably how it would have set up. Now, again, with Mercedes power unit, with Kimi have passed him, sure, that's a possibility too. And we still could have ended up the way we did. But Kimi never passed Lewis in this whole thing. He passed Lewis because Lewis came in to pit. That's how he got ahead of Lewis. The only Mercedes that passed Lewis was George. And that was right before he went into pit. So yeah, I think it definitely would have made it even more interesting than it was if they had gone with the strategy that everybody else did and pit at least under that first virtual safety car.
I do want to give Ferrari a little bit of credit, though, for just like sticking to a plan rather than kind of being up in the air and getting both drivers confused and whatnot. At least they were both said, they were like, no, we're doing plan A, just stick with it. I think I'll give them a little bit of credit for that.
Lewis looked happy right after the race. He looked like, hey, it was a good race. Like, obviously there's some things to work on, but we're right there. And I guess the takeaway for Ferrari is, yes, our cars can't, we knew that Mercedes was sandbagging a tiny bit. Yes, their power unit is pretty good, but the only other team that's competing with right now is us. So I feel like Ferrari gained a little confidence in their 3-4 finish by just being able to run with them for a while and challenge them and make it something that there was a battle all the way down to the final lap.
Yeah, I think I'm of the opinion that it probably wouldn't have changed the actual final race result, but I do think that Ferrari missed a chance to be more directly competitive. I think if you do the pit, if you bring them both in or you bring one in, you get one car in the mix who's a lot closer to be able to threaten George or Kimi. And I think that's something that then you kind of back that driver to figure it out. Can they get close, or are they not going to have enough laps? Are they not going to have enough battery power? Whatever it is, how are they going to be able to manage it? I just think that they gifted what was it at one point, like 19 or 20 second advantage to George, and then had to try and eat into that. I think if you get into a position where that is much less, maybe it's 10 seconds, maybe it's 8, maybe it's 5, we know that those can come down pretty quickly, especially with, and this is something that I think for Ferrari specifically is going to be interesting. We know that their smaller turbo really helps them in terms of their starts. So they can get their turbo spinning at max, whatever rate turbo spin at. What is it, revs? Is that what turbo spin at? What is the measurement of a turbo?
I don't know, actually. Probably revs.
Okay, sweet. All right. You were looking at me laughing like I was being silly, and I'm sure I am, but I thought you...
I just like how you're describing it.
Yeah, well, there you go. So yeah, I don't know exactly technically what they can do. I just know that their turbo is more efficient because it's smaller, and the bigger ones that every other car has takes a little time to spool up, which is why their starts are so much stronger. But I do wonder if that's going to be an advantage all throughout the year, because if you're talking about, all of these different tools that they have to use and all of that, Ferrari, it feels like they might be able to access a bit more of their power more quickly. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about turbo lag, because all these cars have, these computer mechanisms that basically eliminates turbo lag. But in terms of just how much power output their cars can have from at a sooner than maybe the others, I do wonder if that continues to be an advantage that we see on different tracks, on different types of tracks that maybe have more corners where you're coming out of the corner and then you're gunning it, and maybe they're able to pick up just a little bit more time there because their turbo is more efficient. I don't know, but I'm interested to see how this is going to go. I also wanted to talk about somebody else who was not fighting for a podium position, but who impressed the hell out of me. Arvid Lindblad. Y'all, in his first race, not only did he pick up points, he finished 5 spots ahead of his teammate, and he was scrapping with Max. He didn't get the memo, the Racing Bulls memo that, listen, when Big Boy is behind you, you get out of the way. He was like, nah, we're going to have some fun here. He kept Max behind him for multiple laps. I wanted his radio, and I might have to go back and watch it. I wonder if Apple will let me do that, go back and watch a driver replay. I want to hear him during that, because I just want to know how he sounded. Was he giggling? Was he giddy? Because it looked like it. It looked like he was enthused to be like, oh yeah, look at me. I'm in F1. I got a 4-time world champion and he can't get by me. Look at this.
I'm so excited for him. Obviously, part of it is just seeing another brown person on the grid. We haven't had one in a while. He's half Indian and really emphasize that part of his culture too. We saw a lot of, he went to India right before this race and did a lot of stuff there for V-Carb and Racing Bulls and whatnot. And you've seen his family and stuff. So I'm really excited about him, and the fact that he's just literally come racing right off the bat, no fear, no holds barred, acting like he's supposed to be there. That is so cool to me. And like, I'm so excited for what he's going to do. And he already showed up, Liam Lawson, in the first race. Like, Liam got to be worried.
Liam's in trouble.
Yeah. At this point, if anything happens to like Arvid is the next in line for that second Red Bull seat. Liam's not going to getting back to that. I think that is what we've established already.
Well, I mean, if you recall, Lindblad was the guy that they tried to get a waiver for last year to race, to potentially, it was to replace Yuki potentially, because he was 17 and he wasn't yet 18, so he wasn't allowed to race. They had to try and get a waiver, and then they never followed through with it. But I part of the reason why I saw 3 a.m. This morning is very late on, because for us, we never got the F1 TV feed on TV late, right? It was always on ESPN. You'd get the champagne pop, and all of a sudden Nicole Briscoe would tell you that you're going to another sport. So you wouldn't, like, for me, I'd be able to get those. So late last night, I was up and just kind of watching their post game to, just see how it was compared to Sky Sports. And they had Lindblad on very, very late. It was like on the East Coast, it was probably like 2:35, 2:40 in the morning. And so, I'm sorry, 1:40 in the morning. And so just watching him speak, I forgot that was his first race, because he just had this aura of confidence, this aura of like, I've been here before. I understood what I did wrong. I thought I had a great race. He talked about, racing against Lewis and having a moment where he was kind of racing alongside Lewis, and how cool that was, because that's who he grew up with. Like, Jensen Button was like, oh, so you remember my race? And he's like, Jensen, I was 2 when you won. So no, I don't remember. I don't remember you. I'm sorry. He's like, but I remember Lewis and watching him. And so he's like, it was kind of a full circle moment to look over and see that his car was next to me. But then I snapped into it because I have to try and beat him. And so again, that sort of respect for everybody who was on the grid that, paved the way for him, but to also say, my job's to beat him. And I thought I did pretty well on my first day. I'm pretty excited that I'm here. I was very, very, I had a lot of respect gained for him. It's just the poise that he showed and the confidence. This isn't going to be the last time he surprises us with a finish this season. So I'm really, really excited to see more of him.
Yeah, my thing with him has always been like, every time I listen to him talk, and it's weird because I know when I say this, it's going to sound like he's conceited, but I don't really get conceited. I just get like really thoroughly 100% full belief in himself, like full confidence. He talks like since he was born, he's had a seat in F1. Like, to him, I'm just where I'm supposed to be. That's it. It's not like I'm so grateful to be here. He is. He is. He understands that, like, this is a rare opportunity, but he is so secure in his talent that he's like, this is where I should be, and I'm going to show you that I should be here, so watch this. And he had several watch this moments during that race where I was like, oh my, and during qualifying. It was like, whoa, this kid is legit. He's putting out extremely good laps and mixing it up. Made it to Q3 in his very first qualifying session with these brand new rules and everything, which we do need to talk about a couple things with these rules, but I'll get to that in a second, because I was just really impressed with him. And I know that, like, Red Bull, just be patient, all right? Like, Hajar's car blew up. That's not his fault. There are some people saying that maybe his driving style, impacts or lowers reliability. I don't know anything about that. I've only seen him for one season in F1. Actually, I watched him a bit in F2, and he was all right there. I didn't see those same problems, even though he was bonkers on the radio in F2. He's less so now, but, like, just calm it down. Please don't put Arvid in that Red Bull seat next to Max just yet. Give it some time, let both of them cook, and let's see what happens. But I do think, like y'all said, Liam, it's a wrap for you, my guy. Like, Arvid is, I do not know how many times he's going to be Arvid, but I can already tell you, battle of teammates, I'm giving it to Lindblad after one race. That's right, after one race.
Let's be fair.
That's what.
Liam got 2, so we should give Lindblad 2 before we start making changes.
Oh, fine. I guess I can wait a whole other race before I make a determination on who's going to win that battle. But yeah, that was fun. I just like to see all these young drivers. I mean, suddenly we blinked and we have Hajar, we got Behrman, we got Colapinto out there. You know, we have so many young drivers. Bortoletto, he was also fun out there too. Like, we have so many young drivers who are stepping up. So the grid looks very different, but it's very fun, full of a lot of talent, and that's really cool. I do think, though, I want to talk about a couple more things before we get into reviewing our predictions and giving our zoomy and gloomy boys, because we are back to doing that and these race reviews, because it's really, really fun to do. But I want to talk about two different things. The first one is, I'm really excited about how this went, because we had several big names who were not there who could have changed things a lot at the top. Max, we know he hates these cars, which I actually think George, when he was first interviewed out of there, he was like, I love these cars and I love this engine. I was like, you little troll. It's hilarious. But I know Max hates these cars, but it doesn't mean that he can't be quick in them. So he wasn't there because he spun out in qualifying, something we never saw, but apparently it was one of those weird rear locking, the brakes are in the rear's just locked and he spun out. And so he was way down the grid, wasn't a factor. Lando Norris wasn't actually a factor because he qualified poorly. Oscar Piastri should have been a factor, but he crashed out on before the formation lap and ruined his race. So we have multiple drivers who could and should be in that mix from here on, and how they manage that and how that goes. We haven't really, like, we saw all this action with two of the bigger teams completely out of it. No Red Bull, no McLaren. And that's fascinating to me. So I'm very interested in that aspect of it as well.
I don't know that McLaren, even if they were there, that they would have shaken up much. Maybe Oscar more so, but they didn't have like a bad qualifying per se. I think they just did the best they could with this car. Oscar qualified P5, and I don't remember where Lando was, but whatever it was, like, it was still, Q3, but in the bottom half. And like, I don't think they could have done any better. Like, the other cars were actually just that much faster. I think you're right. Obviously, Max just had a rough crash, which is why he wasn't there. And like, the Red Bull is fast. Hadjar got into Q3, so Max probably would have been up towards the top also. But you're right. I think, that's all part of the game too, is just who can qualify well in these cars and who can like maintain that across a whole race. And it is good to see those younger guys stepping up to the plate and actually being able to like challenge the more veteran drivers for these like points positions.
I think also it's good to see a bunch of different people feel like they have a stake in getting to the top, right? Like Mercedes being back, there's a lot of Mercedes fans. The Tifosi, FIA wants Ferrari to be good. Let's just be real, right? If they're good, then the Tifosi is happy. The Tifosi spends money. Mercedes fans always there. Red Bull fans always there. McLaren fans over the past few years have started to gain in numbers because of how good they've become. And so it's great to have all of these different cars really, at least early on, right? We're talking about one race. We're diagnosing the whole season off one race. But if it's like this, then that means there's going to be several teams that have a chance at winning the constructors, or several drivers that have a chance at winning the drivers' championship. And so, yes, you have your favorites, but those favorites aren't going to really shake themselves out for a few weeks now. When we really we look back and after, let's say maybe Japan, and go, okay, first 3 races down. Yeah, this car is what it says it is, what we said it is. Aston Martin still ain't doing shit. Like, whatever that's going to be, we're going to probably take a few races to get to that point. So, and then if Lindblad's going to continue to do this, then Racing Bulls has a stake in this. So you have these. Bortoletto did really well in Audi. I will say, again, to the European folk, watch that Audi on the track. I don't care where they finish. They look damn good doing it. Same with Cadillac. But if Audi's going to make that vault to consistently getting points every single week, they're going to be in this. So yeah, it's fun to see so many, as you mentioned, DT, so many constructors get points, and so many drivers have this at least belief now that, hey, yeah, this is a good start. We can build from here and make this a competitive season. That's what we're all asking for.
Yeah. One thing I also wanted to shout out was, and we only got it in I think one race, maybe two battles, like on track battles, but when they put the battery graphic on the screen, I was like, yes, that's what we need because it had boost and it had overtake and it had the miles per hour, it was kilometers per hour, I believe. But you could see what boost was doing versus what overtake was doing when they deployed it, how much battery. You could see the battery draining and recharging as well. You could just see that cat and mouse game playing out, which I thought was cool. I thought that was really, really cool watching that because you could tell how hard the drivers are having to work and kind of strategize when they use the power that they have available to them. And that's just fun. And I want to see them do that more. I know it can look like a lot. It's a lot of numbers moving very quickly on the screen, a lot of things going up and down and boost highlighting and then overtake highlighting and then going down and the battery rises up a little bit. Like it's a little chaotic in terms of the graphic, but I think it's really helpful, particularly when you're watching a battle.
The boost mode, I guess overtake mode, first of all, the numbers initially made no sense to me. And yeah, I know we've covered the regs. And I was just looking at them like, that number is low, that number is high. That's all the extent of like it. But also,
as soon as you start talking about kilojoules,
kilojoules,
I'm like,
I put the little data monitor up on my multi-view. And then after like 5 minutes, I took it off. I was like, this is hieroglyphics. I can't read this right now. It's after midnight. But I also think that it was fascinating because, yeah, it sure was a cat and mouse game in some of those situations where you kind of saw, oh, this guy's about to overtake this guy. Wait a minute. This guy hit the brakes. So he just gained like 40% of his battery back. Now he's back in the game. And I just like, again, this whole, there's going to be a point where someone's going to have all the boost in the world and then fail to deploy at the same time. This is like Dominic Toretto in Fast and Furious with Nas. Like Brian zooms past him and he's like, too soon, boop, just hits the button and just zooms past him again. It's going to be that sort of thing.
That's exactly what
it's
exactly
what it's going to be.
Thank you so much for dumbing it down. Like we got to
Just
go to
rewatch
Fast
the
and
whole
Furious
series.
for me because I looked and I was like kilojoules, kilowatts, kilo whatever. I don't know, but put it in Fast and Furious terms. I'm like, I got it. He hit the button at the wrong time.
I was trying to think of what. If you're watching the Sky Sports feed, I think it was Crofty who was talking about the kilojoules, at least on that end. And I haven't done that stuff in ages, so I couldn't wrap my mind around that. But what did get me was like when he likened it to how much power the average British household uses in a day. And he was like, every 16 laps that the drivers go, the one car would be able to power a house for an entire day. And so like doing that over a whole race, like,
That's
yeah, right.
amazing.
Like if you can even fathom, if that helps to wrap your mind around what's going on, I think that was a good way, like a good comparison.
He should have just ran with that because when he said kilojoules, I thought that Mike and LP had changed their group name and were coming out with a new album. And they weren't, so I was disappointed. Crofty let me down with the kilojoules. So, but yeah, when he started, again, sometimes you just got to relate it, especially when you're using early on. You got to just, that wasn't something that was an issue last year. They didn't talk about kilojoules. They barely talked about battery, right? It was more about, do you have DRS and do you have enough DRS charged up? And I just need them to be like, this guy has NOS in his tank. This one, NOS tank empty. Needs to get more NOS. And you could just be like, got it. So don't push the button because car won't go vroom vroom any faster. And just try to hold off this other guy. So that part is going to continue to work itself over the coming season too. And again, all of it's fascinating because it's all something that whether you're new or a veteran to this game, you're experiencing it for the first time. So we're all rookies here.
All right, last thing I want to talk about before we get into reviewing our predictions and Zoomy and Gloomy Boy is that, so I was doing some listening and a little bit of reading before we jumped on, and a couple teams had some problems with AI. So as much as I think that I was of the impression that the drivers have all the responsibility of figuring out how much power they have and deploying it, not true. Now they'd still have to press the button, but AI learns the track and will give you an amount of power available depending on the part of the track. Apparently, this is what messed up Ferrari in Q3 Their AI was wrong, and so that's why they looked like they were really fast on the medium tire, and then by the time they were on the soft in Q3, they weren't able to match with the top times. I mean, Leclerc I was like, this is going to be a battle for pole with Leclerc, and he could not get anywhere near George Russell. Apparently, that was a problem that they have to fix with AI, and I believe also this is what led to Oscar Piastri's crash. Now, he did some silly things in terms of getting on the curb, but the problem was the AI gave him a lot more power on the throttle than he was supposed to have at that particular moment. So I think it was, I'm trying to remember exactly what I heard and how to break it down, but it was like, on that lap, which again was just like a reconnaissance lap, it's like a lap before a formation lap, they gave him access in that area of the track to more power than they gave him access to in Q3. So he hit the throttle thinking like, okay, like this is normal, like I'm gonna get a reasonable amount of power for this, and the car was like, let's go. And he was like, oh my god. So like apparently they're trying to program this stuff to help the drivers out, and again, I just want to say, AI, we need to pump the brakes, all right? Pump the brakes on some of the AI stuff. Like, I understand it can be very useful, and I do think that eventually the models will learn, but if they, like, that could have been a dangerous crash for Piastri. It took him out of the race, yes, but it also could have injured him. I mean, and you can lose confidence in the car and yourself if you don't know what the car is going to do and how you're squeezing the throttle and how much throttle, if you're going to get a completely different response, or you don't know if you're going to get an abnormal response because suddenly AI decided, oh, let's give you more power here, and you don't know that it's decided that. To me, that's a little bit scary. So I just want teams to be a little careful with this stuff. I think the technology is being pushed all around the world. I don't want to get into a big AI discussion. I certainly could, because I hate the shit, especially the way that like our economy is tied into it right now, and it's not doing anything to bring in any money or make anybody's lives any better. But like this was a real life example of maybe it's not ready to do all of that just yet.
That's really interesting. I didn't see that part. I just watched like a breakdown of basically his lap before the crash, and specifically they were like, listen to the actual car. So the guy doing the breakdown was silent for the whole thing and just pointed out where to listen. When he was just coming out of the pits and kind of starting to rev up the car, you could see, and also how much he was shaking, and it was just really clunky, and like the gear shift sounded really clunky as well, which is not what it had sounded like, I guess, previously. So there was already like some concern there. And then when he went through, I think, turn 3, that's where he had a little bit less throttle than he was what he wanted to have, or what he was like, what he thought he was supposed to have. And so that then turn 4, like he again thought that he would get less throttle than what he was expecting, but instead it gave him way more than what he was expecting. And so he was already like pushing even harder. And because of that, he just lost control. So you're right. Like, I guess that makes sense. Like the AI thing, it just came out of nowhere. But it like gave him too little on one turn. And so he tried to compensate, but then that overcompensated and gave him too much on the next. And it was just, he couldn't do anything about it. If you're going that fast, even if it's a recon lap, you're going that fast, you can't control the car if it like literally gives you turbo boost when you don't expect it.
Do y'all remember the Office episode where Michael Scott is so reliant on GPS? And the car, he like drives into a lake because the GPS told me. He's like, I drove my car into a lake because GPS told me to do that. That is what happened, is what you're telling me, with this chat DRS ass AI system that they got in these cars.
Chat
Cars,
DRS.
like, what we need to I'm with you, André. We need to reevaluate our dependency on artificial intelligence, because if it's going to start driving you into curbs, into walls, we need to stop using it, because people are real and AI is not. I need them to learn the difference.
Yeah, I'm gonna not say anymore, because then I will go on a rant again about it. But yeah, I do think that's interesting. I do think that models that learn are good, but they need to be able to, like, learning in real time is something humans do. Machines have a difficult time applying all the context of everything that happens with humanity. And so sometimes maybe you give a driver a lot more power in a reconnaissance lap than you do in a Q3 lap, and then he's out of the race. Like maybe that's what happens, or you ruin Ferrari's qualifying because that ends up happening as well. I just think you need to still have a human checking these things. I'm not completely against it, but I do think using it as a tool as opposed to like the decision maker is how you're supposed to utilize AI. And I'm seeing a lot of the uses being pushed as, and also in this instance, being used as the decision maker. And that scares me.
I also want to say one more thing about what you said about Ferrari in Q3. In the cooldown room, George tells Charles, it's like, oh, you guys are actually really fast. Like you're faster than what you thought. And Charles just he doesn't say anything. He just shakes his head and starts laughing. He's like, yeah, but qualifying. And then George is like, no, I think you guys did something wrong in Q3. Like, I don't think it was the speed of the car. I think it was something else. So he maybe was alluding to that if they had similar issues too.
George is just annoying. That's really all I got from that interaction. George is annoying. George is like, oh, well, I just won the race, but let me tell you what y'all did wrong in qualifying. Your car's actually fast. Chin up, buddy. Your car's fast. I just know you messed something up. It's like, George, shut up and just drink your champagne. All right, let's take a quick break, and then let's get to our predictions, and then talk about our zoomy and gloomy boys. All right, here we go. We are going to run through the predictions first because I think this is really fun, of course, to go through the predictions. And then we will do our zoomy and gloomy boys, which we will let you know exactly what that is in case you weren't with us in season 1. You weren't one of the 30 who's been listening to this podcast, which thank you so much to the faithful 30 who listened to this podcast. Okay, Deepti, podium. You had Charles, Oscar, and George.
Wow. I got 2 out of 3. Not in the right spot, but 2 out of 3.
Yeah, not in the right spot at all, but you did. Kyle had George, Oscar, and Charles, so similar to you, just jumbled up a little bit, but he did get the winner, but his podium was wrong in the number 2 spot, so his was probably the closest. Ebony had Oscar, Max, and Lewis, so nope, and a nope. I had no effing idea. That was my podium. And you know what? I was wrong because I probably could have guessed that George Russell and Kimi Antonelli would have been 1-2, given all the talk of Mercedes and how good their cars are going to be. So I'm giving myself a wrong answer there, even though I tried to be funny and open things up. Donald, you got the race winner right too. George, Charles, and Oscar.
Close. That was close.
You were close.
We all just wanted Oscar to have a good race. We're all just disappointed there. That's what it was.
We really did. We really did. Or, well, y'all did. I didn't participate. Constructor scrap. We always try to choose who's going to have the most points out of a weekend and who's going to have the least points out of a weekend. Deepti, can you remind me who had 0 points? It was Aston Martin, it was Williams, and
Cadillac.
Who else? That's yes. Of course, yeah. Cadillac. Which, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead. We called you out last time when you did this, and you had Cadillac as your least, but damn it, you were right.
I love them. I do, but
it's disappointing.
It's going to, they're the new kids. They need some time to get up to speed, literally.
Yeah, correct. For most points, you did have Ferrari, and that was wrong, unfortunately. Yeah. Ebony had Ferrari with most points as well, but least points she was correct in one. She said Aston Martin, which was kind of like the easy way to go with this. Kyle had Mercedes and Aston Martin, which so he was right on that one. Donald, you had Ferrari and Aston Martin.
It was close. They're 3 and 4. So
sorry.
Right, we're like not too far off.
We'll let it work.
But not as many points as 1 and 2, which means I was right on that one. I had Mercedes and Aston Martin. I actually thought I was going to go with Williams at one point because I was like, I'm hearing their car is massively overweight and they got issues. But I just went with Aston Martin. But either way, I was right. I actually did say, though, that I didn't think either Aston Martin was going to finish the race. And again, as we said, technically, Lance Stroll was on the track when the race ended, but I'm not calling that a race that was actually run. I don't think he ran even half of the laps in that race, or maybe a little bit more, because only 58 laps. I think he did about 30 or 35 laps, but that still, to me, does not qualify as doing a full Grand Prix. So I'm going to go ahead and give myself the point there. Okay. Let's get into our Zoomy and Gloomy boys. Zoomy Boy is who we think just had a good weekend, a good showing. They did something that they can take a lot of positives away from the weekend. We want to spotlight that, highlight that. It's not always the race winner. It's relative. And same thing with Gloomy Boy. It is relative. You can have a Gloomy Boy who's second on a podium, depending on how the race went and different things that happened. So it's not necessarily looking at the grid or the final race results and see who's at the top and who's at the bottom. We put it in context and say who had a Zoomy weekend and who had a gloomy weekend. So Deepti, I want to start with you. Let's start with your Gloomy Boy and then give us your Zoomy
Yeah, my
boy.
Gloomy Boy, I'm going to go with Isaac Hadjar. Just because, again, we talked about, we wanted this to be redemption race for several people. He specifically was one of them for me because, he did better. Last year, he didn't start the race. He also kind of crashed out on the formation lap. This time he got through 10 laps. So a little bit better, but still not the way, especially after such a good qualifying, not the way that he wanted it to go. So he still has to get over this Australian curse, the curse of Melbourne for him. So he's going to be my Gloomy Boy this week. And then Zoomy, there are actually a bunch that I could have picked. I went with Kimi and specifically also his mechanics, because after that FP3 crash, we didn't even think he would get to qualifying. And not only did he make it to qualifying, luckily there was a red flag that gave him a few more minutes to get the car ready, but he qualified really well. The mechanics fixed the car well enough to get him into Q3 and qualify front row. And then similarly during the race, he had a bad start, but he was able to recover from that and get back to P2. So I think it was a really good lesson for him in confidence and how to recover even if you've made a mistake early on.
Yeah, I was actually really surprised they got that car out, but I like you said, they were helped. I don't know if they would have gotten it out without that red flag stopping thing. So yeah, I do think that was beneficial to them. But the fact that, they were working extremely hard, and the fact that Mercedes car is so good that they didn't need to piece it together to be 100%, just get it on the track to where it's not going to fall apart. We know Kimi and the car is capable of getting it into Q3 and getting into a good position. And they were able to make that happen, which I do think is pretty awesome. So I love that. Donald, how about yours? Gloomy Boy first, and then your Zoomy Boy.
My Gloomy Boy is Oscar, because damn dog, can't even make it at the recount lap, in the home race. Yeah. And again, like Deepti said, another person who wanted some redemption, and we were all pulling for you to get up on that podium, and nah. And I think also, just when you talk about papaya rules, the last thing you need to be doing is starting out the season like that. Just don't give Zach Brown any ideas to be stupid. And there it is. You planted the idea.
He already pissed me off on the grid walk, on Martin Brundle's grid walk. Martin was like, "Oh, what a shame." He's like, "Yeah, it's for Oscar, but we've got this other car." Yeah. He's like, "Oh no, anyway, let's talk about this one."
Yeah. So again, don't be stupid, because it makes Zach Brown be stupid, and we don't want that. So he's a Gloomy Boy. Zoomy, I have Mercedes as in general. We talked about them potentially sandbagging and them kind of being coy about how good their engine really was, and to finish 1-2 kind of validates that. And wow, they put in a shift. They were racing. They lost the lead. They gained the lead. They had a better strategy with regards to tires, and it worked out. And they, even once they did that, they're like, hey, let's just see if we can ride these tires all the way to the end. And they were able to conserve their tires and do all that. So hats off to them. That was a great weekend for them.
All right. And Ebony has a double Gloomy and Zoomy Boy. They're both Ferrari drivers. One, she says, Lewis, how's being your own race engineer and driver? So he's got the dual position, which, I will say, there wasn't a ton of argument. There was one time when he was just kind of giving some light encouragement to Lewis, and he's just like, leave me to it. But like, ultimately, I think they communicated okay. I do think they got a strategy call wrong, and Lewis was upset about that. But it did sound like overall it was better, which is unfortunate because his race engineer is going to change at some point during the season as well, because they're waiting for somebody else to get, I don't know, gardening leave or whatever's happening with that. What they do when that's over, then he'll be able to join and be Lewis's race engineer. But at least it wasn't the dude who just straight up ignores him. And then Zumi Boy, she did say Ferrari drivers, because those Ferrari engineers, they hooped a little bit. They might have hooped a little bit with this car. It looks good. Kyle also wrote in. He said his Zumi Boy is Ollie Behrman. I like that because Ollie Behrman got himself into the points. He finished 7th, and his teammate was just outside of the points, finished 11th. So Ollie did a really good job there. I want to see year 2 Ollie. I'm excited about that. And then Kyle and I have the same gloomy boy, Liam Lawson. It is for the same reason. Like I said, you're next to a rookie. It's the only rookie on the grid. You've already had the very devastating impact of being demoted after 2 races at Red Bull, but you kind of clawed his confidence back a little bit, was a little bit better in the second half of the season last year. Now you're up against a rookie, never been in this car before, never been in F1 before, never really faced any sort of adversity. You need to be the one to be ahead of him in qualifying, ahead of him in the race. And yes, it's one qualifying session, it's one race. But I think the difference between him finishing 13th and my Zumi boy, Arvid Lindblad, finishing 8th, that's a massive difference, my guy. I think that's the biggest difference on the grid for all cars, that actually all teammates who had both cars finish. It can't be that, buddy. It can't be that. So yeah, I think he's got a lot to figure out when it comes to this kid, because this kid is, I mean, he's legit, but it can't be that right off the bat. Like, he just got here. That's wild.
Can I also give an honorable mention to Gabby Bortoletto? Similar reasons to Ollie Behrman.
Yes.
They're both in kind of like mid-table cars. Obviously, like Audi is new also to the grid with new engine and everything. And so Gabby first of all, qualifying Q3, he wasn't even actually able to do Q3, but getting it that far and then getting in the points also. I am excited for year 2 Gabby as well.
Yeah, I do wonder how Hajar's race would have gone had he not had that engine issue. So I'm curious about that as well, because there were some moments in qualifying where he looked good and on the pace, and there are some moments where he didn't. And so I'm very curious to see where he might have ended up in a full race without that issue. But anyway, we won't have long to wait. Next weekend is a race weekend, and it's a sprint weekend. So not only do you have all these new regulations, you've got one practice session before you're thrown into sprint qualifying and a sprint race. And it's the type of track that is also going to be challenging for this era of car, because of that extremely long straight at China where you can do no harvesting. You're going to have to manage your battery, which is kind of another thing that I think people like the nerds are worried about with the racing. Like, oh my gosh, it's going to look so terrible when a car slows down. These cars are going so fast. I got to be honest with y'all. When they're going like 220 miles per hour and then drop to like 180, I'm going to be real with you. I can't fucking tell. I ain't got no idea. It just looks like they're going fast. So I think if you're like a racer, you might be like, oh yeah, I see he had to take that approach a lot more cautiously, or maybe he's doing that to save the battery or to get more battery energy or whatever. But to me, they was just going vroom, vroom around the track, and it looked good to me. So yeah, I'm here for it. And China's going to be another test. So we will see.
Aston Martin complete the entire sprint? That's a big question mark.
It's a massive question mark. It'd be hilarious if they do the same thing during the sprint. Like, they start off, they do 2 laps, and they wait a little while, and then come back out when everybody else is on like the final lap. I think they should just keep doing that all season. Just be like, oh, hey guys.
I think it's going to be even funnier? I think Alonso could even potentially get the car into maybe not points, but top half, because only eight people get points. But he almost qualified Q2. He said to someone, he was like, if I had to race a full 3 hours in this car, if we were competing for points and positions, he was like, yeah, I'd do it. So maybe it's not at like permanent nerve damage. Maybe was like a little bit of an exaggeration. I don't know. But I think it would be hilarious if he actually does well in the sprint only.
They are doing the equivalent in the race. They did the equivalent of going to the gym and seeing somebody on the machine. You're like, yo, man, can I work in sets with you? Can I? I'll do a couple, and then I'll go do something else, and then come back later, and I'll do my sets over here. Man, if they'll get up out of here with that, if they get pulled from the grid for like 10 laps and try to enter back in for the sprint, I'm gonna lose my mind.
I'm rooting for it. It's like the number one thing I'm rooting for. I want to see them put the car in the pit after 5 sprint laps and then come back at the end and be like, all right,
yeah, we got finished, right? We
made it. We crossed the line. Yeah,
Check your flag.
finished the
Check
sprint
flag,
race.
right?
Look at that.
Next to the name.
Look at us. Look at us. Our car is not
Plus
that
12
bad.
laps.
Oh, I love it. I'm here for zombie Aston Martins all season. All right, that's it. We're done. We'll talk to you pretty soon because we got to preview this China sprint race and Grand Prix, which is coming up very, very soon. We will do that later in the week. So for Deepti and Donald, I'm Andre.
Vroom, vroom.